Our next conversation is with somebody who exemplifies black excellence. Now, only 2% of fighter pilots are black. Not only is he one of them, but he's also the first black man to lead the Air Force. His name? C.Q. Brown. General C.Q. Brown. I spent time with him at the Pentagon. Here is a look at his experience as one of the first and one of the only black male leaders in the military. The story of aviation is one of fits and starts. The smooth flights we see now came after years of pushing the limits of physics and human imagination. Meet General C.Q. Brown. He lives and breathes the most rarefied air of all as a fighter pilot and now the Air Force's first black leader. We spent time together at the Pentagon. His story is both familiar, shaped by the traditions of family and culture, and unique, the isolation that comes with being the first and often the only.
I'll go back to something my dad shared with me when I was a lieutenant. He's always ask for what you want. The worst the Air Force can do is tell you no, but they can't tell you yes if you don't ask.
CQ's family story starts with the military. His grandfather was drafted in World War II.
If you think of the civil rights movement during the middle 60s, it wasn't easy to find a career or a job. And he actually had one, I mean, as an Army officer.
He knew early on things were different for him.
My dad came back from his second tour in Vietnam when they bought a house in one part of San Antonio. And my sister and I were only 2 African Americans in the entire school. And that included everybody. And that, you know, you stood out. I felt the same way in the Air Force in some cases. Because as a fighter pilot, usually I was the only African American in the squadron. And there may be some others in support staff, but the only African American pilot in the squadron.
That distinction of being the only drove him to excellence, but it was not a straight path to success.
After you finish pilot training, you finish your initial F-16 training, and then you go in for our evaluation or check ride. And when I did that check ride, I failed. And so that, you know, on my records, you know, my very first major check ride is a failure. It's really your attitude once you have that failure of how you bounce back.
Did it hit you more knowing that you were one of the few black men in that position?
There is a, sense of pressure, because not only do you represent yourself, but you represent other African Americans. And you want to make sure that those come behind you have the same opportunity.
CQ's progress did not belong to him alone. It's the progress of a whole community, most significantly, the Tuskegee Airmen. One of the most prized possessions in his office is a glass sculpture of the airplanes flown by the Tuskegee Airmen, and a picture signed by many of the pilots.
I wonder if they knew who they were really signing it for.
Well, back then it was Captain Brown. No aspiration to be Chief of Staff of the Air Force.
And this one, I mean, I'm looking at this one, and we talk about the reflection of history and the Tuskegee Airman, black aviator, and I see you as the first service chief. So what does this bring to mind for you?
A lot of motivation, a lot of respect, partly for what the Tuskegee Airmen did. What they had to do to get where they were, to show that they had the capability to do and fly airplanes, maintain airplanes, because many, if you look at the Tuskegee Airmen experience, it was designed to fail. And they did not fail.
CQ's launch into the halls of power was followed by a turbulence in America. A few months in, George Floyd was murdered, launching Black Lives Matter into a movement that had aftershocks around the globe. As a leader, as a black man, CQ was compelled to speak his truth.
I'm thinking about protests. In my country, 'tis the sweet land of liberty. The equality expressed in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that I've sworn my adult life to support and defend. And thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about living in 2 worlds, each with their own perspective and views.
We're 1 year later. Do you feel or sense progress from there?
I do. And I do partly because it drove a conversation. I think it really helped us to take a hard look at ourselves. And I think that to me is important, that we've had those conversations. Now the real important part is, what do we do beyond those conversations?
Your sons, their experience, are you worried about them having to carry that same burden of being the first or being the only?
think about it quite often. Partly because I want them to be successful.
And safe.
Yeah, and safe. You know, I don't get to talk to them as much as I like, and so every time there's a phone call, I always worry, you know. Hopefully it's, you know, never bad news. And that's the part it's always on my mind.
Kelly, it was an honor to sit with the general and spend time with him and get some lessons learned about leadership, but also to get personal. And as you just heard him, family and faith do carry him through, and it's the reality that he faces, even despite that uniform and all those stars and all those bars on his uniform. He still faces the same reality many black families face every single day when they set their children out of the house.
Yeah, first of all, I'm just so pleased that you were able to get this wonderful interview with an incredible man who's given so much of his life to his country, but hasn't forgotten the value of giving first and foremost to God and his family, and being concerned as a black man, no matter what status he's achieved in life, enough as a black American to speak out on social justice issues, and more important, when he's sitting down with his family, to love his wife, love his children, and care enough about his family that he would be concerned about where they are, what they go through, hoping that he always gets a phone call that they're safe and well, and not caught up in something that we have seen happen in our country far too often when it concerns our young black boys and girls. General, mad love for you and respect.